What would you do if you find out that your doctor eats human meat, both cooked and uncooked? A young nurse called Amaka just finished from nursing school and then got employed to a well-known hospital in Lagos. She met this very handsome doctor that she felt was a bit reserved and shy. Everybody always talked about how he's very good at his job, but he's always sort of antisocial. Even when they have any social gatherings at the hospital, he never really come out nor participate. He keeps to himself and doesn't really interact with people and stuff like that. His name was Abiodun. Abiodun was single, charmingly handsome, and some of the nurses like him. But he doesn't seem close to anybody, he just has a weird character. He doesn't buy lunch from the hospital canteen because he brings his own lunch pack from home, and people admire him and refer to him as a homely guy for that. But little do they know what hides beneath. At some point, Nurse Amaka was placed on duty with him, and after about some months working closely with him, she started noticing some strange things about him. Things like, whenever he performs surgeries, such like if he removes stuffs like fibroid, appendicitis, or even sometimes he performs a cesarean session, if maybe sometimes the baby might die, he asks the nurse and the cleaning staff to allow him a few hours with the growth or whatever that was removed, that he wants to carry out some tests on it for research purposes, that he will dispose of them himself. But people never noticed that he never disposed of them, because every morning the truck which comes to pick up medical waste daily will come and leave. It was this specific nurse that noticed he never disposed of those human parts. So this young nurse started to suspect him. So she snuck out and followed him one day after work to see if he disposed these body parts on his way home, only to find that he drove straight home with them. She spied further and found out that he has a big freezer where he keeps them, and she also saw him microwave and eat something out of the freezer that evening, and she recognized it was a body parts. From there, she started asking questions around his apartment, but he was a loner and nobody knew much about him. Till she asked the gate man, who then revealed that nobody visits him, except one lady that comes sometimes, maybe only during festive period once or twice a year. So the nurse wondered who this young lady was, who comes to visit him once or twice a year. And the security man revealed that he had a phone number she had given him to be able him to call her, just in case anything happens to the guy. She found out that the lady was his sister because they didn't have any other family member living within the state, and he was not in good terms with his family. So in case anything should happen to him, the security man should call her. Amaka then collected the number from the gateman, and this young lady over the phone revealed so many things about the doctor, how he grew up and always had a weird character, and how they had found him killing the pets they had growing up, and even once caught him eating the pets raw. They had tried to help him out of this strange behavior by taking him to different prayer houses and even mental homes, but one day he just disappeared from home at 18 years of age. She was only able to find him because she searched him out on the internet and found him by a stroke of luck with a new name he used. After a few years, he ended up trusting her enough to reveal his location, and she eventually came to visit, and he made her to promise not to tell the family about his new life and whereabouts. That night, Amaka couldn't sleep. The image of Abiodun microwaving human flesh kept replaying in her mind. She knew she had to find out more, but cautiously. The hospital was a maze of corridors, and Abiodun's office was tucked away behind the surgery wing. If he was hiding something, maybe she could find evidence in there. The next day, during a busy shift, Amaka volunteered to help clean Abiodun's office. While the doctor was busy in surgery, she slipped inside. The room was sterile and orderly, but when she peeked into a locked cabinet, she saw a tiny keyhole just big enough for a hairpin. She pulled out a hairpin from her hair and with trembling hands picked the lock. Inside, she found something chilling. A set of old medical journals filled with strange, handwritten notes. They documented bizarre experiments. Not typical medical research, but detailed accounts of harvesting human tissues, preserving them, and even references to nutritional value. Suddenly, she heard footsteps approaching. Panicking, she slammed the cabinet shut and returned everything to its place. Abiodun walked in and stared at her with sharp, piercing eyes. "Amaka, what are you doing in my office?" His voice was low, but steady. I was just looking for some files you asked me to print," she stammered, heart pounding. Abiodun's gaze lingered on her suspiciously. "You're treading dangerous ground," he said quietly, then turned and left. That night, as Amaka left the hospital, she noticed a black SUV parked across the street. Inside, a man sat with dark glasses, watching the hospital. She ducked bedside a parked van and made her way through a quiet street, heart racing. Over the next week, strange things began to happen. Her locker was rifled through, and she found a note inside that said, "Stop digging or you'll disappear, just like the others." Determined, Amaka called the sister again, who urged her to be careful and revealed that Abiodun had been involved in a secret cult, rumored to believe in gaining strength from human flesh. One rainy evening, Amaka was walking home when she heard footsteps behind her. Turning sharply, she saw Abiodun himself blocking the street, a cold smile on his face. "Why are you following me, Nurse Amaka? This isn't a game," he whispered. Before she could react, the black SUV screeched to a halt, and two men jumped out, grabbing Amaka by the arms. Abiodun's smile twisted into something darker as he said, "I warned you." But before they could drag her away, a loud honk echoed from behind. A group of hospital staff, alerted by Amaka shouting, which echoed really loudly, rushed in. The men hesitated and fled. Amaka collapsed into the arms of a colleague, breathing hard. She knew the nightmare wasn't over, but now she had allies. Abiodun being restless in his home and saying to himself they were getting too close. That night, after the near ambush on Amaka, Abiodun sat alone in his dimly lit apartment. The hum of the freezer in the corner was the only sound in the room. His surgical gloves were on, smeared faintly with blood from the day's procedure. He stared blankly at the chunk of liver on his plate. Human, female, mid-30s, a fibroid patient who hadn't survived the operation. He chewed slowly, savoring the richness, but his mind wasn't on the taste. It was on Amaka. She was smart, smarter than the others, and worse, curious. The way she looks at him lately, with cautious eyes, not fear, but understanding. She knew, or at least she suspected. Abiodun walked to the freezer and opened it. It was neatly arranged, labeled in his coded system. S18, C-section, F infant, liver/pancreas preserved. He touched the frosted Ziploc bags, gently, like a man caressing a family heirloom. "You're all witnesses to the future," he whispered to the contents. "You made me what I am." He sat at his desk and opened his worn leather journal, the one no one must ever find. His handwriting was sharp, almost aggressive, like each letter was carved with a scalpel, a knife. The note, Nurse Amaka. Level of curiosity. Dangerous. Contact with sister confirmed. Surveillance required. Eliminate if necessary. Must not let her expose the discipline. He paused, his hand trembling slightly. He hadn't felt emotion like this in years. Fear, rage, something else. She reminded him too much of his mother, suspicious, relentless, always trying to change him. But Amaka wasn't family. She wasn't protected. His sister Bissy had broken the pact. She'd told the nurse things he never meant to be told. And worse, Bissy had called again tonight, begging him to stop, to leave Lagos, to disappear before it was too late. "She's going to report you, Abby. She has friends in the police." He hung up on her. He had come too far. He wasn't the scared, trembling teenager who used to hide in the shed eating raw cat meat under the full moon. He was a doctor now, respected, brilliant, untouchable, and if they dared to take that from him, he would make them regret it. That night, he donned his black hoodie, gloves and mask and slipped out of his apartment through the back stairs. He walked through the dark streets like a shadow, eventually making his way to Amaka's residence. He knew her schedule, also knew she stayed alone, knew her window was slightly faulty. From outside, he saw her silhouette inside, pacing, agitated, probably on the phone again. He watched silently, but just as he was about to move closer, he saw something else, a red dot on his chest. Sniper scope. He froze. "Hands where I can see them," a voice yelled. From the shadows, a team emerged, police, private security, and two of Amaka's colleagues. As they surrounded him, Abiodun smiled faintly. "You think you've stopped something?" he said as they handcuffed him, his voice eerily calm. "But you've only scratched the surface. I'm not the only one." 2 days later, at a secret interrogation facility somewhere in Lagos, Abiodun sat chained to a metal chair in the middle of a cold, fluorescent-lit room. His hands were sore from the cuffs. A detective paced in front of him, lean, sharp-eyed, and visibly disturbed. "We know what you've been doing, Doctor," the detective said, slamming a folder on the table. "We have evidence, witnesses, samples from your freezer. You're finished." Abiodun raised his head slowly. There was no fear in his eyes, only amusement. "You think this is about me?" he said softly. "You still don't understand. I'm a disciple, not the origin." The detective frowned. "Disciple of what?" Abiodun smiled almost lovingly. "The Order of Akudaya, an ancient discipline. Long before your forensics and CCTV, we understood the transference of energy through flesh. We are healers, reformers, evolutionaries." The detective snorted. "You're a cannibal." "You call it cannibalism. We call it reclamation. Our bodies are temples. Weakness is rot. Sickness is betrayal. We only consume what's necessary to ascend." Suddenly, the lights flickered. A faint hum vibrated through the room. Then, a total blackout. In the darkness, Abiodun whispered, "Right on time. Start here?" Around 2 a.m., somewhere outside the facility. A black SUV with tinted windows rolled up silently. Inside were 3 robed figures wearing ceremonial beads and cloths laced with ancient symbols. One of them, an older woman with scars carved down her cheeks, whispered in Yoruba, "The bloodline must be preserved. Retrieve him." Another figure, a former mortician turned loyalist, nodded and pulled out a tablet, hacking into the facility's backup power system. Within moments, the security doors disengaged. Back in the interrogation room. Red emergency lights lit the hall as chaos erupted. Officers scrambled. The detective drew his gun and rushed to check the main corridor. When he returned, Abiodun was gone. The cuffs snapped clean. 3 days later, at a remote shrine, deep in Ogun State, Abiodun knelt before a large stone idol carved with dozens of mouths and eyes. The cult elders chanted, swaying with calabashes filled with red liquid. One of the elders approached him. "The nurse, she knows too much." Abiodun nodded. "She's brave, strong. She could be one of us." The elder shook his head. "Or she could be our undoing." Abiodun stood. His white robe now bore the blood mark of ascension. "Then I'll deal with her myself." Now, about the Order of Akudaya. 300 years ago. The origin. The Order of Akudaya began in the dense forests of what is now southern Nigeria. A hidden sect formed by outcasts, lepers, plague survivors, and mystics. Led by a priest-doctor called Elaran, the cult believed that consuming the dead would imbue the eater with their wisdom, strength, and spirit. They practiced selective cannibalism, not for hunger, but as a sacred ritual. Only those deemed spiritually clean could be consumed. Virgins, pregnant women, infants, or those who died during sacred rites. Over time, they began creating deaths, choosing who was worthy to become part of the great flesh. They developed ancient preservation techniques, secret herbs to mask the odor of dead, and bone tools used for ritualistic dissection. Their knowledge passed from generation to generation, hidden in coded manuscripts and oral chants. Only the Ascended 17, a council of the highest members, could practice full consumption. By the 1950s, modern medicine had infiltrated Africa. The cult was nearly forgotten until Abiodun's grandfather, a village healer and secret member of the order, initiated his son and unknowingly passed the dark gift down to Abiodun. Abiodun was born under a red moon. The cult believed him to be a reincarnated harbinger, the one to bring the order into the age of science and cities. He was chosen early, trained, federal, broken, rebuilt. Amaka had disappeared after Abiodun's escape. But she wasn't hiding. She was hunting. Using contacts from the medical board, a rogue journalist, and the retired police detective who'd interrogated Abiodun, she formed a covert task team. She began gathering missing persons reports tied to hospitals, mortuaries, and surgical centers in Lagos, Ibadan, Abeokuta, all with one pattern: medical waste unaccounted for. She traced the cult's movements, identified symbols, mapped remote ritual locations, and found a former cult member, a scarred man named Kahinda, who'd escaped years ago. Kahinda showed her the 7 shrines, sacred sites used for ritual feasting and offerings. "There's a gathering coming," he said. "The harbinger is going to complete the ritual of reclamation. They will consume the flesh of a blessed newborn under the next blood moon. Then nothing will stop them." Amaka made a vow at one of the shrines, covered in ash and broken bones. "I will burn this to the ground." At the 7th shrine, Ogun Forest Reserve, night of the blood moon. The cult was assembled, fires blazed, drums pounded in hypnotic rhythm. Abiodun, robed in white and smeared in blood, stood before a stone altar where a sedated baby lay. He raised a ceremonial blade, but in the shadows, Amaka moved. Her team had rigged explosives at the base of the shrine, disabled the guards using tranquilizer darts, and spread flammable oil across the cult's supply tents. They were silent, tactical. At exactly 3:17 a.m., just as Abiodun began the final chant, Amaka stepped out into the firelight, shotgun raised, eyes fierce. "Step away from the child," she said. Gasps erupted. Elders shrieked. Abiodun's eyes widened, not in fear, but in awe. "You made it," he said, smiling. You are one of us. Amaka fired. The blast caught him in the chest, flinging him off the altar. Chaos and explosions ripped through the forest. Fires roared. Cultists screamed and scattered. Amaka rushed to the altar, cradled the baby, and escaped into the trees. Abiodun, bleeding out, crawled toward the altar, whispering in a cracked voice, "The flesh must live." Amaka returned moments later, staring down at his mangled body. She crouched beside him, looked him in the eyes. "You were brilliant, Abiodun," she whispered. "You could have saved so many lives." Then she poured the last canister of oil on him and lit a match. Days later, authorities discovered mass graves beneath the 7th shrine. The Order of Akudaya was officially declared extinct. A commemorative foundation was formed in the memory of victims lost to ritualistic murders in the healthcare system. Amaka returned to work, but not at the hospital. She founded a special investigations group dedicated to occult crimes in medicine. People still whispered about the doctor who ate flesh. Some say his spirit lingers in morgues, but Amaka knows better. She watched him burn. She made sure of it. 1 year later, at a small clinic outside Calabar, Cross River State. It was a quiet, humid night. Nurse Inobong, new to the rural clinic, was finishing her shift. The generator had just shut off. She moved through the dark hallway with a flashlight, headed for the morgue to finish the logbook. The air turned cold as she opened the door. Inside, under the dim emergency light, she noticed something odd. A drawer marked "Unclaimed Body, Female 28" was open. Empty. She blinked. Maybe the orderlies had moved it. As she turned to leave, she spotted something lying on the floor. A single ceremonial bone needle, intricately carved with ancient glyphs. She bent down, picked it up slowly, and suddenly heard a whisper behind her ear. "He fed the flame. Now we rise." Her flashlight flickered and went out. The Order of Akudaya was not destroyed. It merely shed its skin. To be continued.